You are very welcome to Cawley's Call with me, Alan Cawley, powered by Benetti Menswear. A topical debate show covering all things Irish football, along with 1v1 interviews with top-class sports stars from a wide range of different sports.
It's me that's putting on the green jersey, me that's going to take flack from people to say, you're not even Irish. I was big enough to say, I'm going to take it.
There's many people I've spoke to, they always say, I used to put money on you scoring the first goal, but I've never seen any of that money though.
And Andy, he says, I want the performances that I got from you in Scotland with the under-16s, not that rubbish that you gave me over in Iceland. Yeah.
Hi everyone, you're very welcome to Cawley's Call, and I have a very special show for us today because firstly it's our first show of the new series, which I'm really excited about, and secondly I have two very special guests today with us. Vinny Perth, the Dundalk manager, and Keith Long, the Bohemians manager. Lads, it's good to see. We're out of lockdown now. You're back training. Slowly but surely we're getting back to some sort of normality. So how has it been returning for yourself, Vinny, getting back to training?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, we're heading into back end of week 4 at this stage, so it's been a long time. At this level, we're dealing with athletes of the highest level, and they just need to be kept going. So it's been difficult in the lockdown, but now that they're back on the pitch, really excited. And the good thing about this this off season, if you want to call it, is I think people have been looking after themselves so well. So it's been so easy to get back into football and real football as opposed to any sort of running drills or anything like that. So once we protect our injuries, which we've done, we're able to concentrate on football and improving people, and so it's been a big help for us.
Keith, the same for yourselves, yeah? Back training?
Something similar, Alan. I think our boys have obviously really enjoyed coming back to get involved in team training. Like Vinny said, it was a difficult period. In lockdown, training in isolation, having individual programmes, etc. So to get the group back together was a fantastic step, and now we're building towards, obviously, the 31st of July, which is the resumption of the league campaign. So we've got some good games coming up to prepare us ahead of the season start. And the boys' fitness levels look good. They've come back strong, in a better place than we were, let's say, in January, when pre-season would have started. So we're really looking forward to getting the season resumed and getting back to playing competitive football again.
Now, as everybody knows, you're rivals on a regular basis every week, but for this show and the purpose of this, we want to talk about the broader picture in terms of Irish football. So we're going to leave the Dundalk hat at the door and the Bohemians hat at the door, if that's okay. And I suppose just to kick it off, in terms of Irish football has been dragged through the mud, as everybody knows, the last 18 months. Rightly so, people can suggest or can say for themselves because of how poorly it's been governed. But for us who have close links with the game here, we know it's been governed poorly for a long, long time. That old regime is gone. There's a new regime in charge now. We're all hopeful of change. But I suppose just to start the discussion off, Irish football right now at this moment in time, where do you think it's at?
It's at one of the biggest crossroads I think it's ever been at. Yes, the past is the past, but there's huge legacy issues because of the past, and clubs are in so many different positions. You've got a real full-time element, you've got a very, very professional part-time element, and you've got a completely part-time element in it. And it's a fine balance. You've got clubs who will fight their own corner, and rightly so. Whether it's in the Premier Division, whether it's somebody from Sligo, whether it's Dundalk at the Rovers at the top, Bows, all looking for their own things, and rightly so. But ultimately, we've got to get on, and we've got to get on together, and we've got to improve together. And we can't have a situation where, for argument's sake, the weak dictate to the strong. We have to have people striving for the highest standard. This football is too important to people in this country, and I think it's time we get on with the job in hand. And we don't use the FAI to blame on everything. We look at ourselves as clubs and we improve as ourselves as clubs, and I think it's a real opportunity now. And I have a bit of concern about the road ahead, that we have to take the right path. As I said to you, I think we're at a massive crossroads in Irish football, and we've got to be very clever in the next decision we make.
Keith, the same question to you, I suppose, just in terms of the bigger picture with Irish football and all that's gone on in recent times. In your view, where is it right now at this moment in time?
I agree with Vinny. I think certainly we're at a crossroads. I think strong leadership needs to be provided by the people involved. you know, in Abbottstown. I think there's a fine line between inclusiveness in the decision-making process and providing strong leadership. And I think whilst clubs have certain agendas, ultimately, you know, decisions need to be made, and we need for the good of the game. And I think certainly it's interesting to see Stephen Kenny's press conference yesterday and see some of the noises coming out of that. And football has to be at the centre of all conversations in the FAI. You know, we've got to make sure that club football is strong. We've got to make sure that international football is as good as it can be. I mean, we've got to, you know, certainly Stephen has been tasked with qualifying for the Euros, which will be absolutely massive for our country and football in this country if we were to qualify. Obviously, we've got to get through the Slovakian game and potentially, you know, a game against Northern Ireland or Bosnia. But if we were to come through, you know, which is very difficult in itself, those two games, but if we were to come through that and get into the Euros and to potentially play some home European championship games in Dublin, it would be massive for the country. It would give football in the country a massive lift, but also it will help in terms of you know, the FEI and the resources and the financial windfall that will bring, because it's badly needed investment. Football in this country for far too long was abused, and we need to put that money into key areas of the domestic game, but also into our international teams at international level to try and improve and raise the standards.
Yeah, you mentioned there, I suppose, Keith, Stephen Kenny, and we will come to that later on in terms of the international stuff, but I suppose just on the new regime, so far there probably is the guts of a year or whatever, just under a year kind of gone in, and Gary Owens, Niall Quinn to the forefront of that. Have they, as kind of League of Ireland folk, because a lot of the sound bites coming out of them is that the League of Ireland will be at the forefront of things going forward. Has that given ye hope in terms of what that can bring to the league here and about the bigger picture itself?
Yeah, it has and it hasn't. One is, it can't be a false dawn. I mean, we're in a situation where the past is the past, but we're in a situation where we've clubs voting not to play football, or not voting to play football beyond October because they can't afford to play them. We spent 3.5 to 4 months effectively round over money before we then decided, well, what's the league going to look like? What's it going to not look like? And while I don't believe in the last regime we would have been at the top table even having the discussions, I think we would have been told, go and sort it out yourselves. So there's positives in that, but ultimately we haven't got anything that new from the FEI. We haven't got something new. There's reasons why we haven't got something new. Yes, they don't have money, they're in their own financial constraints, but we haven't got that new from them. It's took a long time to agree just to come back for 13 matches and then finish up in October, and we see us all again in February, early March, lads. I mean, if that's progress, well, by God, we've a long way to go to be anything. And
do you have any sympathy towards them, Vinny, in terms of, I suppose, the one thing I often find with football in general in this country, it's so fractured at all the different kind of parts. So you go from schoolboy, grassroots, right up to the elite level, as you says. And you know how much I love the League of Ireland and ourselves, and that, for me, that's where it should be, and everything filtered down from there. But do you have sympathy then in terms of, you mentioned when these conversations were taking place, that you have full-time teams, part-time teams, amateur teams? Was that kind of a stumbling block for them, or do you still think they should have taken the leadership role in terms of making the decision rather than letting the clubs decide for themselves? Yeah, well, look, clubs have to have an opinion. Football has to be in the middle of it. You have to listen to clubs. And we look at the Premier Division, you look at Waterford, Sligo, Cork would have all their own sort of needs. You look at the other end of the table, Cork, Rovers, or Cork, Dundalk, Bows, Derry all have our own needs. But, like, at the bottom line is we've clubs voting to not play that much football. We have nearly a 3.5 month off season in the League of Ireland. So we've had a 3.5 month off season. We've played 5 games. It'll be almost 5 games before we return to play football, or 5 months before we return to play football. We play 13 games and we take the guts of 3.5 months off. I mean, if that's what football in this country is, it will never become an industry. There is no point in trying to build football clubs, build pathways for players if that's what you're giving them, and I accept COVID's in the middle of that. So yes, I have sympathy for the FEI, but a time when funding is probably at its cheapest it would ever be in terms of money and different bits and pieces,
This is the time to reinvest in the league and make it a stronger league. And you have to ask the question, how much more would it have cost to play into December and actually have a meaningful league? You have to ask that question. And ultimately, it took so long to sort out the money issue that by the time we got around to sorting out what the league was going to look like, it was too late. And I'm not sure that the real people, and it's not taking anyone's sort of character in terms of their want for it and their belief in Irish football, but when you look at, there's so many people that could have helped more. When you think of names, people would say Brian Kerr, obviously, but you think of, say, John Caulfield, you think of people with real understanding of League of Ireland, and they know what the challenges are for Sligo and Cork and Derry and Dundalk. Why wasn't there a consultant like that brought in to this process? And we waited and we sat around and we've done nothing for so long that we've ended up in a really, really difficult situation, and nobody has got what they wanted ultimately. Nobody. And it doesn't look that good for what I'm looking at, what's ahead of us. It doesn't look that good.
Would you echo those frustrations, Keith, or in terms of, I suppose, the new regime, the position they found themselves in? How do you think they've handled the whole kind of return into football situation?
Well, I think there's no doubt that, domestic football, Irish football, professional football in Ireland, I don't really like the term domestic football because it's professional football in this country. It's the highest level of football that we have. I think the new regime certainly have that central. It's a key pillar in their strategy going forward, to put it front and centre and to make the product better.
You firmly believe that?
I do, but I suppose that's the point I made a little bit earlier insofar as that I said there's a fine line between being inclusive in the decision-making process and providing strong leadership. Clubs will never agree. They'll always fight their own agenda and have their own viewpoint, and like Vinny has said, that's correct and it's right, but ultimately the decision has to be made by the FEI and the board, and ratified by the board. So I think certainly we could have got to where we are at this point a lot sooner. There could have been a lot more clarity provided from Abbottstown in relation to the league, and certainly they need to be strong in terms of their vision for Irish football, the resumption of Irish football, and so on. So I think we've got to this point now. There's no point really in trying to go back over it. It is what it is to a certain extent, and that's another horrible phrase to use. But we have to make sure that our next steps, what we do, going forward, are football, like I said, is central to every decision or in every conversation that we make. The club game, the international game, the underage international teams, it's so important, it's vital, it's crucial now that we make the right next steps and the right decisions around the game here. And it has to be inclusive. There's lots of good voices and good football people in this country with lots of experience and I suppose ideas on the game to a certain extent. Obviously, the last regime wasn't transparent. We got an opportunity at this moment in time with the committees to get people with a footballing background, with expertise onto these committees that can make decisions, that can drive the game forward, and hopefully we can be part of a new dawn in terms of Irish football, because for far too long like I said, we've been mistreated as a league within this island. We've been looked down upon, we've been frowned upon. We haven't helped ourselves. There's been lots of year after year there's been bad news stories around the league. Clubs have been badly run. Ultimately it comes down to finances and resources and money being available to clubs or being pumped into clubs, private owners, private investments being able to put into clubs to try and raise the standards, to help in the resources, to help with the structures around the game here, facilities, etc. So for far too long they've been neglected. Clubs haven't done their business properly. But I think we're seeing a slight change in that regard. You see what's going on at Dundalk, you see what's going on at Rovers, at our own club. Things have been on the up over the last number of years, but we need to improve at all levels of the game, and the clubs are responsible for improving their own individual club. But the FEI have to drive it. The people within the FEI have to drive this league, put it at the forefront and central to all the conversations. Football at international level, club football has to be central to how we're going to improve as a country, because we're going to be tasked, Alan, with producing players. With Brexit and everything else, we're going to be tasked. Players will stay in the country a lot longer. You know, we have to make sure that the resources are put in to our academy structures, that they're based on criteria, that money just can't be given to clubs. You know, it has to be criteria-led, and we have to start producing players and developing players and help players either come through our academy system into our first teams, or potentially to try and play at the highest level that their ability will allow them to.
And again, even on that, like, we'll get to the underage leagues, because that's very, very important in terms of the future, as you rightly say. But already, like, just to kind of on the regime stuff, I'm reading yesterday the new minister's come out, Catherine Martin, and she's basically said that there'll be no changes to the Memorandum of Understanding in terms of the bailout and what that brings. And you already have discontent amongst council members towards the board and what the new board will look like. Like, the political side of things, I've already mentioned the football side of things is so fractured. Just in terms of how fractured even it seems to be in Abbottstown, do you ever see a day when, like as Keith says, Vinny, that we'll all be singing off the same hymn sheet? Or am I living in fantasy land when I think we may see that?
No, I think you've got to be fair to Irish football, and that when you look at the Premiership, you look at English football, the holy grail for everybody, the amount of money there is trouble there. You see chairmen of clubs in the last couple of months who aren't happy with stuff that's happened down the leagues. You see the likes of Brighton, Villa, Palace, all these clubs about to give out about the restart of the league if it was being played in neutral venues, and there was about to be legal cases. So sport has that element to it. There's never going to be everyone singing off the same page. But what we need to create in this country is...
But I mean, not so much just with the restart. I mean, for the whole future going forward, everybody, like, from the top down, that we're all striving for that one goal. Yes. I understand there's a bit of self-interest.
No, I mean, the point I'm making is we never all sing off the same page, okay? The way certain even clubs are run, you look at the model that Bohemians take compared to the model that Dundalk take. We can both argue pros and cons to it, and I could argue one case, and in 4 years' time I might be the manager of Bows and Keith's manager of Dundalk, and we'd have a completely different argument. And that's life, that's football, whether it's business or football. But what the FEI have to create is not everyone sings off the same page. They have to create an environment for people to grow. So if Dundalk want to be the next Rosenborg or Bate Borisov, there has to be an environment to grow into that. And as it currently stands, it's not there. And if Sligo Rovers wants to be the next Rosenborg, Bate, or whatever you want to call these clubs, regularly playing European football at the highest level, then you have to create an environment. It's not there. It's nowhere near there. And it's not just because the quality in the league isn't good enough. The actual structure around the league and Irish football is not good enough. So just on that, Vinny, for that environment to be created, for that to happen, what needs to happen in terms of where the League of Ireland needs to sit amongst Irish football? You mentioned already the elite level that it is. Keith used the term professional football in this country. For that to happen and become a Rosenborg or a Bate Borisov and be in the Champions League year in, year out, in terms of a structure for League of Ireland to filter down to everything else, what needs to happen? I mean, you'd need more than an hour or a couple of hours to get that sorted out, but you have to create elitism. You have to. If we want boxers winning Olympic medals, we can do it. Okay, we create a national centre for boxers, and we can do it, and we can get them to that level. We have to create that in Irish football as well, and it's not there yet. It's not. It's so difficult. Dundalk or Rovers or Bows could become the next Rosenborg. Can they stay there? And the first thing people will say, well, they're not playing against enough good teams in the league. That's not true. The one thing I know about is European football. If I watch Bate Borisov league games, they're playing against teams of not a good standard. But, you know, the government builds them a stadium. Once they get into a group stage Europa League and becomes the national stadium, and then the club structures underneath it go from there. We have to create, there has to be an environment, and it doesn't feel there's an environment here to grow. As I said to you, we're heading into a Champions League game in a couple of weeks. Yes, COVID is there, but our hands are tied everywhere. Hands are tied everywhere. Whether people like the political point or not, First Division clubs have the same vote as a Premier Division club. We've been 7 years driving towards European football at the club, and we've got ourselves seeded as European club. And in our league structure, we've the same vote as clubs who have no full-time footballers. So what is their ambition and what are Dundalk's? That I don't want that club to be thrown out of Irish football. Like, I came from that place. I mean, I done most of my real coaching in Leinster Senior League until I got a chance in League One. So I'm not dismissing anybody. I'm just saying, how do we give? We've got to let the top clubs not run football, but at least look what they're doing and say to everyone else, you just need to get to their level or else play by their rules, lads. And if you can't beat them, that's tough.
To me, that sounds very logical, Keith, and a fair point. I would have to say from someone who's been involved as a player and now looking at the game, going to the games week in, week out. I think Vinny makes a strong point there in terms of that. Can you see that happening down the line, or will it always be a case of the makeup of our league allows us just to be kind of almost an acceptance for what Vinny is suggesting there amongst some of the other clubs? And that's no disrespect, as I say, towards those clubs, but if we're ever going to achieve what we want to achieve and strive for that greatness, is the appetite there amongst everyone to strive for that?
The honest answer is probably not. You use the word strive. We have to strive to improve, to be better as a league. We have to. One of the challenges for football in this country is to make every club a 365-day of the year club. 360. How many days in the year?
Even how far is that off, Keith? Like, to be honest, Vinny mentioned the word industry there.
Every club needs to aspire to try and be full time, to try and be professional as much as we possibly can. But it's very, very difficult because there's so many different, like Vinny said earlier, strands in the game. You've got different clubs that operate at different levels. Some are full time, some are part time, full time, some are completely amateur. So. Maybe we need to go to one league. Maybe we need to, dispense with certain clubs. Radical change is required. Maybe we need to have a look at some of the smaller clubs and maybe merge them in their geographical area, like a Wexford going into a Waterford, a Cove going into Cork, whatever it might be. They're just two examples. At Longford maybe merging. People won't like what I'm saying, but potentially that's probably what.
But these are the hard decisions.
This is what we probably have to look at in order to try and improve the league, to get to a full-time situation, or at least to try and get to a model where it's professional, that there's certain standards that are being adhered to and so on. But we have to strive for that. We've been frowned upon, like I said earlier, for far too long in this country. There's many qualified professional people, really good football people operating in club football here. And we need to fight for that respect. I mean, to show people that we're better than what we've done over the last number of years. We can't continue to have the same conversations time and time again. We have to progress Irish football, and in order for the club game to rise, in order for the international game, the international team to improve, central to that is our Irish football. Club football in this country. So, but we need to, like I said, have difficult conversations. Radical change needs to be required, and whatever that looks like, we all have to aspire to be better. We have to try and strive, like you say, to improve the club game in this country.
Both of you are very much on the same page in that regard, and obviously the two of the most high-profile ones in terms of Dundalk and Bohemians at the top level or top of the league table. I suppose just from a point of view, though. Again, I go back to this new regime as such, and we're all hopeful of change. The appetite that ye have and the passion that both of you have in terms of trying to hit that point there, do you think that same appetite is amongst the people coming in now to take over Irish football and to take us to where it needs to go?
Do I think that? I don't know the answer to it. I'm not sure. Do I think that people in the FAI would love to have 2 or 3 clubs in a group stage Europa Leagues in 5 years? Of course they would. I mean, that's better for the game.
But in that, like, anyone can say that because it's fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of, is there a substance, Vinny, to the people that are there now?
Look where, again, obviously you have to come back to Dundalk at the moment. But look where Dundalk are at the moment, okay? And over the last 7 years. Why can no other club do what Dundalk done in the last 7 years? It's just, yes, geographically, there's a couple of clubs like Maybe Finn Harps, maybe Cove are geographically in a difficult situation. But why can no other club come from surviving in a playoff within 7 years, having whatever it is, amount of titles, and people will say, well, Dundalk have money. We didn't have money. Dundalk isn't built on money. Yes, we've got money, we've earned money on the pitch, and we've got new owners who have supported the club in terms of building the club, and that's what we want. We should actually, it would be great if every club had owners willing to build new facilities and training grounds and support the team. But why can no one else do what Dundalk done? I mean, Finn Harps stayed up in the playoff last year. Geographically, they're in a different situation. But why can't Finn Harps not become a Dundalk? I mean, we went from bottom to second, lost the league to Pats to win the league the following year. Our players were part-time, full-time. Our players were at other clubs. Like, you look at someone like Dane Massey, who's gone, you'd know Dane and would have worked with Dane, but Dane has gone from Bray Wanderers for 3 or 4 years to arguably the best left-back for the last 6-7 years. Like, why? Because there was an environment created for him to become a European player, a footballer of the highest level. He's now full-time. Yes, he now earns good wages, and people say, oh, he's paid a lot, but he didn't come from that beginning. So there's an environment created in that club for him to become what he is. Why can't that happen at 7, 8 other clubs? And unfortunately, people won't like it. We may end up only needing 10 clubs, but we've got 10 clubs of a really good standard, and it drives the rest of Irish football on, and it gives our young kids something to aspire to do. I want to be part of that league. And I can see why they don't want to be part of that league at the moment. Well, I think we're getting closer to it, closer to an industry. But pre-lockdown, I was confident that we were on the right path. A lot more clubs were full-time, a lot more clubs were part-time, full-time, which is, in this country, is probably the right model for now. We're getting closer to full-time. So too many people take excuses. Oh, you can't do it. Oh, Dundalk have loads of money. Or Rovers have a new investor. Or, you know, all of these, that's just excuses. That's just excuses. And not to sit on an ivory tower. We've come the hard way, Dundalk. We haven't just landed on money. And it'd be unfair to say we did.
You'd be well placed, I suppose, Keith, to answer that in terms of when you went into Bohemians, limited budget, limited resources, and you've taken them to a point. Now, I know you as a person and your mentality anyway that would have, and you've mentioned already, striving for good things and good things to happen. But is Vinny right in what he says that everybody with that mentality can achieve that?
Yeah, I think.
Or to even add to that as well, the point where Vinny's at now in Shamrock Rovers, because you're looking at the league now, do people think it's almost the defeatist attitude that they're kind of going this way and there's a bit of a gap towards everyone else? You're obviously the closest challengers trying to close that gap, and you probably well believe you will close that or hope to close that. But say, for example, of some of the lesser clubs, as Vinny says, it's an excuse to try, oh, well, they have all the money or they have whatever, and forget about it. Yeah,
well, we're still a part-time, full-time club, but we don't use it as an excuse. We train as much as Vinny trains. We train as much as Shamrock Rovers train, and St Patrick's train, Derry City train, Cork City. But we do it in the evening. We do it at night time. So, you know, we're looking. We make no excuses for being part-time. We've tried to progress as a club steadily on and off the pitch in a sustainable manner over the last number of years. We haven't just arrived at this point either. You know, we've steadily progressed year on year to the point where last year we were able to achieve a European position, which is fantastic. Obviously, COVID has changed the look of that and what have you. So, you know, like, we've had our own problems at Bohemians. The club was probably, you know, an hour or two from going out of business, you know, a number of years ago. There is some legacy debt issues at the club that have been navigated. You know, the club, there's been shrewd management of the club from a board level, and we've been able to navigate to the position that we are now. That we can, you know, budgets have increased again steadily. You know, Vinny would have gone in at Dundalk, and you know, with Stephen, and first year you came second, is that right? But wouldn't have had a huge budget. But you've got to create the environment. You have to have the culture. You have to have the right people. You know, to try in order to bring your club forward, and it does take time. You know, Vinny and Stephen at Dundalk did remarkable things very, very quickly. Ours has been a little bit more steady, the progress to a position where we're at now. where we like to think that we can challenge the likes of Dundalk, challenge the likes of Rovers. We're still a little bit off them, you know. We're still a little bit off them, you know, in terms of resources, financially. And I mean, the reality is this: if you don't have money, you can't improve your football club. You can't get the best players in. You can't get the best people in. You know, but it's not an excuse. You've got to work within your restrictions, I suppose, what you've got, and you try and maximise that. And that's what we've tried to do. At the club, to grow the club in a sustainable way, that it's embedded in its community, that people want to come to Dalymount on a Friday night. They enjoy coming to Dalymount on a Friday night, and Bohs is a big club app. Yeah,
and that's important as well, because I go to Dalymount, well, I'm at all the matches, but I'm in Dalymount a fair bit, and it's right to point out as well the stuff off the field, because there's been an awful lot of good off the pitch stuff and stuff created down there in terms of embedding them in the community, as you rightly say.
Yeah, they don't necessarily come always to see the team win, you know, because obviously we've had our ups and downs, you know, but they can identify with the team. I think that's really important. The off the field stuff has been really good. The community stuff, you know, memberships are up, season tickets are up. You know, our challenge now is to move the club forward, is to grow the club again. Can we increase our stadium, get a new, obviously it's going to be very, very difficult now. The Dalymount project, you would imagine, will be put on hold to a certain extent. We want to get a modern, fit-for-purpose stadium in Dalymount where we can, you know, maybe attract a larger crowd, that gate receipts are increase, and then all levels can rise as a result of that. But you know, they haven't always come to see the team win, like I say, but certainly they can identify with what's on offer in terms of the team's performance, because I've always spoke about the togetherness, and I think, you know, you hear about it a lot. You know, but it's really important that the supporters and players are together, and they can see that, you know, one thing that they'll get from a Bohemians player is effort and honesty in industry, and if we can get that on a weekly basis, I think the crowds will come back, because it means something to play for the club.
The word that comes to mind with me, dear Keith, and it's obviously similar with Dundalk, because you look at the public in Dundalk, and obviously success helps too, but the word for me is connection with the people and the fans and the community around the area. I'm looking at, say, you mentioned the Holy Grail earlier, Vinny, in terms of the Premier League and elite level and all that kind of stuff, and obviously we're not competing with that, but I can almost see a disconnection now towards that kind of stuff, and we don't have the top players like we used to playing at the big clubs. So there's a huge opportunity, I feel, for people now to realise that there's football here on the doorstep. Not only what you can offer in terms of the football on the doorstep, the evening out, the entertainment, whatever that might bring, but also the fact that if you go through, and I know we will get the international stuff, but if you go through the international team at the moment, 1/3 of the squad that Stephen Kenny will pick up, that will pick in his next squad, or even you go back to Martin O'Neill's squads, has come through the League of Ireland route. So there's a connection there already with the international team. And if people can't realise, in terms of, it was never more important to be investing in the league here now, because of not only what it brings domestically, but also in terms of the international team, like, we have to capitalise on that as well.
Yeah, I think listen, there's definitely a disconnect to the likes of the Premiership, but we have to respect it. I think the biggest mistake we do is, even around COVID, like you're hearing, well, Germany are doing this and England are doing this. It's not relative to the League of Ireland. Nobody in power has ever said, well, they're doing this in Latvia, or they're doing this in Ukraine, or they're doing this in Slovakia in the return to play. And that drives me bananas, because that's what's comparable to our league. Not England, not Germany. It's completely off the Richter scale. But, I mean, yeah, connecting with, like, again, similar stories going on in Dundalk. We're probably not as loud about it, but you can't walk through the town of Dundalk without passing somebody with something belonging to Dundalk merchandise on them. It's huge. It's a football town, and sometimes we look at the likes of Bohemians are the brand leaders in marketing and in selling their clubs. They've been brilliant at it for many years. And to be fair, it's not a club that's made excuses. They've just got on with it. They've rebuilt their club from the troubles they had. And so many clubs can learn from what other people are doing. And I just don't get that same sense. We're in survival mode at the moment, a lot of clubs, as opposed to forward thinking and people wanting to drive it. And when you look at all the discussions going on, even around the last couple of months, again going back to the restart of the league, if you had to put all the managers in to the room, I think the league would be back up and running now at this stage, to be honest with you. But there's people in clubs making decisions that aren't, even in clubs, aren't real football people and don't understand the challenges they're putting people on. So
I think that's a critical point Vinny makes, Alan, just in relation to that, because you know, clubs traditionally have been, you know, run by local businessmen, you know, volunteer-led, you know, and I think that's really important. That may be a part of the reason why conversations have taken so long, and the decision to get to get football up and running has taken so long, because you don't really have skilled people at the negotiating table with expertise to drive the professional game forward, and I think that's really important. So I think it's obviously it's imperative on clubs to try and get people with that skill set, you know, with the understanding of football, to try and move the game forward, to make decisions quickly, and to, you know, we're the last summer league in European football to come back. You know, that cannot be the case.
You take myself and Keith, right? We're going to clash at some stage on the football pitch. He's going to say something that annoys me, or I'm going to say something that annoys him, and we're going to clash. I mean, it's obvious. We're going to clash.
Yeah.
And we mightn't speak to each other for about 24 hours, and we mightn't even speak to each other for 2 months. But if we have to sort something out, a football issue, we'll get on the phone, we'll meet each other, and it'll be sorted like that. Because both football people. And until we get football people running this bloody league, we're going to end up nowhere. And you'll have people, and that's the thing of, you have people with different agendas. You look at Bows and Rovers, you've got people completely on the different spectrum. But I know, and Keith won't even confirm this, I know that they do talk to each other and they do resolve things, particularly around when they play each other. There's a lot goes on. So the football people ultimately make football decisions. And until we get football people making these decisions all the way through our game, we're going nowhere. And that's why I go back to, you hear the Brian Kerrs, you hear, like, think of people out of the game. So many people that have a real understanding of the game. Someone like down in Cork, John Caulfield, or there's loads of people I'd forget to mention.
Are you talking, Vinny, in at board level at FEI?
Absolutely. We need football people making football decisions.
So Stephen Kenny made the comment. You know Stephen Kenny really well. You've worked with him so closely. All the success that you've achieved. Stephen now is going to be sitting at that top table, whatever that role is. He clarified it himself in terms of he's still the manager, and that's all he is the manager and what he wants to be. But in terms of football conversations, he will sit in and he will try and drive the thing forward as best. That's obviously a good thing.
Absolutely. If he's going to be able to speak to the board from what he believes is the best decision of something to be made on a football decision, absolutely, yeah. Yes, the FAI has to be run like a business. We can't have football people in with no business in. But there has to be a football committee, stroke business committee. We've got to make commercial decisions. We've got to. If the FAI is turning over 50 million a year, we can't just get some guy in who knows all about football. There has to be CEOs. We have to pay CEOs good money. We pay too much maybe for people previously, but we have to pay people good money. Proper businessmen, proper people who can walk in and get real money into our game. But we also need football decisions to be made. Real football decisions to be made, people who understand it. And it's a bit like, we go back to the point, we've to play 13 games, how's that going to look? If somebody was driving that who was a football person, if John Caulfield knew the challenges, and using John as an example, whether it's Martin Russell, whether it's, you know, there's hundreds of people in that game that have been lost for different reasons. If they're making a decision, they know what Keith's challenges is, they know what Vinny Perth's challenges is, they know what Stephen Bradley's, but they also know what Liam Buckley's challenges is at Sligo. And yes, we wouldn't have agreed maybe all on the decision that ultimately someone like that made, but we would have understood that it was a decision made with best interest of football. And we've taken too long to make them decisions because football people aren't running football.
I think it's important to know, Alan, just that the FAI are currently undergoing a restructuring.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so you know, hopefully those decisions will be made and they can appoint the right people. And certainly in terms of club football here, it's vital that Abbottstown.
They're internal jobs.
They've been advertised internally to. But I suppose the point is that there is an opportunity to restructure the FEI, and Gary Owens, Niall Quinn have come in, Roy Barrett as chair. You know, Gary Owens has experience. He is a football man. You know, he's played Leinster Senior League football for TEK in Dunleary. He has been involved in the game. He has a passion for the game. Niall Quinn, obviously, you know, has spent a lifetime in the game and an ex-international footballer. So he has the good of the game at heart. So I think it's important that the restructuring that's going on within the FEI, that the right people are put in place, that the right resources are put in to try and drive it, to maximise the...
You'd like to think Gary Owens is fully aware of that, Keith.
I've no doubt he is.
And the fact that he's appointing Stephen to this, and obviously eyebrows were raised in terms of Stephen going sitting on that. But again, to go back to Vinny's point about football people making hopefully football decisions,
yeah,
it would be a positive.
Of course it would, absolutely. Common sense is not that common, unfortunately. But having football people in those positions, but obviously they're only in those positions if they have the skill set to be there in the first place.
Yeah. And then that's to go back to Vinny's point about advertising internally. Straight away, people are saying, "Well, why can't we bring it?" Exactly.
The new director of League of Ireland is coming from the FEI.
That's what I'm saying. An FEI that's already failed the League of Ireland, you would say, over the last number of years.
It doesn't mean there isn't someone there good enough to do the job, but go through a process, open it up to the rest of the country. Whoever applies, applies. If there's somebody that has the skill set to do the job, he gets the job. Have a football person, obviously, on that committee as well, as a business person, but gets advertised that job externally. And if it happens to be somebody who's from the FEI who gets the job, great. No problem, no issue with that.
And again, that's something that, like all the previous criticism was all about transparency. You're hoping now, the likes of that stuff, Keith, does irritate people.
Yeah, it does. It does. Certainly the internal process around the jobs and so on, the repositioning, you know, of people within the FEI. Obviously, they open themselves up to certain criticism if it's not an external, you know, interview process as such to try and get the best candidate. But you know, the point I'm trying to make is the association is currently undertaking or undergoing a restructuring. Okay, so if that restructuring, you know, from the league perspective, means that somebody's going into a position that is resourced properly, that they have the right administration, that they have the right resources, you know, commercial, you know, to explore commercial opportunities, marketing opportunities, TV deals, whatever it might be, that it's not just a box-ticking exercise, that it's not just, you know, put away in an office in Abbottstown and left to their own devices, that it's central to all it's driving this league forward. It's central to not pay lip service to the league any longer, that it's central to everything that we do going forward. And I'm sure there's people listening in, you know, that will watch this podcast and they'll think, you know, it's not all about the domestic game or the League of Ireland, and it's not. It's about football in this country. You know, we have to make sure that we drive the football in this country, where the next player's coming from. You know, that the international teams are resourced properly, that they can go and play proper international games against good opposition, that the standard is being raised, that you know, that they're not worried about resources and going away, you know, to Spain or to Holland or to wherever it might be, to Italy to play high-level opposition that is going to increase the standards of our underage international teams. So I think it's really important that the restructuring that goes on, that the right people are involved, obviously, but the structure is correct.
That's the key thing, isn't it? Like both of you mentioned crossroads at the start, and that's where we're at. But you've no problem if it takes another 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, once the right people are put in place and the structure is put in place.
Well, I say externally, particularly the League of Ireland job, externally advertise that job. Let's see, is there somebody there with a huge amount of expertise willing to do the job externally, and that's not saying there's so many good people in the FEI. Like the one thing I don't like about slagging off the FEI is then you're forgetting the good work that has been done. You forget the RDOs, like my own son has autism and he's doing a Friday night clinic with an RDO. You forget that that's funded by the FEI and the good people doing that stuff. You forget that the under-21 team last year was, over the last 18 months, was sensational, and Stephen led them. Them players didn't just arrive off the back of a bus. Like, there's been people working with them under 15s, 16s, 17s, 19s. There's structures in place where a lot of good stuff is happening in the FEI, a huge amount of good stuff happening. Some of the work that some of the RDOs are doing is brilliant, and the different departments, and it's huge, and the player development has been massive. I think the quality, the first course used to be, you know, jolly up for lads for a year. It's now becoming, it's improving. All of them things. I seen the course in Finglas where instead of doing the gap year and 5th year, there's people going to a full-time footballers course. All of this stuff is going on. There's a huge amount. I wouldn't be able to list all the projects that are happening. So it's not everything in the FAI is wrong, but at the very highest level, there's got to be more transparency. There's got to be openness. There's got to be the right people in the roles, and I'm not sure advertising, for example, the league director's job internally is the right way to go. And maybe there's someone in there that I don't know is the right person for the job, but at least open it up. If we're at a crossroads, then why not look around the whole of the world effectively and say, there's a job here and offer us, anyone here can make a league better.
No, I would agree totally with that. And again, it's not, as Vinny, he's dead right to outline the fact that there is great things going on in terms of a lot of the staff with the FAI, but we're just discussing, I suppose, that boardroom level for now. The underage thing is a big thing, Keith. Go on, sorry.
I think there is a bigger picture view within the people that are now in the FAI. I think there is a strategy that they want to try and implement. So I suppose the difficulty I have is that we haven't been clear in terms of what I suppose the voice and the noises coming out of Abbottstown haven't been clear. GAA have been very clear, Rugby have been very clear, and their roadmap to getting back to play. We have to establish a clear vision for Irish football, a clear understanding of what we want for Irish football. I think there is that within the FAI. I think they've been hampered with this COVID thing. They were up against it anyway. They came in on the back of significant debt, so they've been very, very hamstrung. But I think there is a definite clear vision for Irish football with the current regime. Don't put your hand out to be slapped. Open up the process when it comes to these jobs and opportunities.
No, I agree with that. I think there's definitely a new belief in helping League of Ireland. I do believe that in the FAI. I just think, bloody open it up. It's massive. It's a massive. The next person doing this job has a massive job in their hands. Let's just open it up and see what we can get. So I'm not critical of them trying. They're definitely trying. The last regime we wouldn't have this discussion.
Have these conversations.
To be fair to the new regime, they really believe in the game. I think we just need to be open.
Hopefully that'll be the case. Another big thing then, I suppose, that's very topical, Keith, and I know you're heavily involved in terms of the underage stuff, Vinny too at Dundalk. There was a lot of, I'm for the national underleagues, as many people are. I think it's the right approach in terms of if we're ever going to create that kind of academy pathway type thing for young players at our elite level clubs, if we do get to that stage. But there was a lot of discontent, and I'm one who came through the schoolboy stuff and would have known about that and the history of all the schoolboy clubs over the years in Dublin and different counties around the country and lads going across to England. There was a lot of discontent from them. Was there any way that you feel we could have brought them on board as such in some way without, I suppose, getting into the argument again? I go back to the earlier part where I mentioned how fractured it is, and it just seems very fractured with those clubs at the moment. I know there's the link up yourselves with St. Kevin's, Malahide, but was there a way that we could have done that to try and please? Again, I know we keep saying we can't please everyone, but there would have been some sort of way that we could have probably brought them all on board together, again, as I say, singing off the same hymn sheet.
This is a difficult one, Alan, because it's very, very political when you get to underage football. I suppose the fractured, fragmented nature of football in this country. League of Ireland now being tasked with the development of underage youth football in this country. So you have to bring it back to the whole how did this come about scenario, and how it was dealt with. Probably by the high performance director at the FAI, Rue Doctor. He came in, he had this vision, he had what he wanted. It was the implementation, that I feel was the problem. It was the process. A lot of people were left outside the conversation, were left outside the room, and this comes back. How do you deal with people's relationships? How do you manage and implement change? And I think that is
probably weren't noting that was part of when that decision was made. It was part of the previous setup.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you think if they were making that decision today, you mentioned a lot of inclusiveness? Would people have been included in those conversations?
There's no doubt. I think it would.
Okay.
And I think be very clear. brilliant schoolboy people in this country, brilliant people, volunteers, giving a huge amount of time to their clubs for the benefit of young players, boys and girls. And they've been sort of cast aside a little bit, left outside the conversation. And I can understand why there's a tension between League of Ireland clubs and schoolboy clubs. That relationship could have been managed better. I believe that the League of Ireland pathway is a right step. I think it's better players playing in better facilities against better opposition with better coaching. I believe it's been a step forward, but we've got a disjointed pathway. We play under 13s, under 15s, under 17s, under 19s. It needs to be joined up. We need to have it across all the age groups. And I suppose academy systems in this country, it's new. A lot of resources have to be applied to, and that's where I suppose Niall Quinn potentially could lend some expertise or help drive that agenda in terms of resources, that it's criteria led. Clubs that have I suppose an emphasis on youth football and underage football. Get the resources that they can apply it in the right areas that can improve. I mentioned earlier on very briefly about Brexit. Players can't go until they're 18 years of age now, so they're going to be left in our country longer. And we've got an obligation to those players to give them the best opportunity to improve, to develop, to grow, and to if they're good enough to move on to the UK, to play at the highest level that they can, hopefully go on to international football. If they're not good enough, that we're giving them everything that they can in terms of education, in terms of their football education off the field, if it's third level, if it's going on to a vocational or a different training, whatever it might be in terms of what am I looking for? Apprenticeship. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so we've got to make sure that we give them everything that we possibly can. We've got to make sure that if they're not good enough to go to England, that we're developing them with first team in mind, that they can come through the pathway and play in the first team at Bohemians or Dundalk.
And it's twofold. Everyone wins then, Keith, don't they? Because if the lad is good enough to go to England, he'll eventually hopefully go on and play for the international team. If he doesn't, he's still maybe going into your first team or Vinny's first team.
But this is the problem, Alan, in my view. At this moment in time, we can't give those players what academies in the UK give. We do not have anywhere near the resources or the facilities to give those players, and that's where the difficulty I see. Because we're tasked with the development of the players now because of Brexit, because they can't go until they're a little bit older. It can be a good thing for League of Ireland clubs because we can demand more training compensation to a certain extent because they're with clubs longer. But I suppose ultimately it's Irish football that's central. We've got to make sure that obviously we want our clubs to do well. We want to bring our players through.
Because of, I suppose, Keith, the lack of investment and funding and the way our league was neglected for such a long time and elite level football here. And I feel genuinely as though we're so far behind other countries and the countries that you mentioned earlier. And I'm not talking about the big superpowers or whatever. But so if we're in a position where we're going to have to find it even hard to bring the likes of an Athlone or teams we mentioned earlier to get up to a level where you're at, how hard is it going to be to get an academy up to?
It's not as hard as you think.
Okay.
Right? And again, you've only to look across the road. They've managed to, and there is issues internally, I'd imagine, between Kevin's and Bows. And again, this is why I keep saying the right people have to make the right decisions. Look at Dublin, where I played my schoolboy football at Cherry Orchard. Cherry Orchard, St. Pat's. Crumlin, Shamrock Rovers. Joey's, Bray. St. Kevin's, Bows. Home Farm, Shelbourne. If they'd have been put in a room with football people and told to get on with each other, this is the new structure and this is how we're going to work it, a couple of years ago, all of a sudden, every League of Ireland club have a hotbed of soccer who produce players for World Cups, for European Championships for the last 30 years, and the Premiership is in it. And we couldn't get them to sit together and talk, and we couldn't get them to work it out. The only club that really done it, to be fair, Bray and Joe's has worked in the end. Kevin's is working. Yes, both sides would probably like to improve things. We have the structure to do it, and we haven't done it, and we haven't done it right. And that has to be a lesson for everyone to go, Why didn't we do it? Why is Cherry Orchard now and St. Pat's not on the same page? It's just wrong that they're not on the same page. Surely there's a football person that can go in there and bang the two heads of them together and sort it out. Now, they have a good relationship, I understand. Same with, rural clubs are in a different situation, okay? We should have better players in Dundalk, and at the same time, we've had 4 players given professional contracts and that. We're getting there, but we've different difficulties. In Dublin, it was fixable. We have some brilliant schoolboy clubs. That Cherry Orchard club, that Joey's clubs, Kevin's, how many players have they produced have gone on to be internationals? Huge numbers.
Which makes it all the more disappointing, Vinny, that, as Keith said, they were cast aside almost.
Yeah, and it comes back to the implementation of the whole. That's what it comes back to. Have the teams in the clubs in the conversation. You know, build those relationships. Don't just come in and dictate. You know, Irish people don't like being dictated to, being told what to do, and rightly so. So it had to be. It was a process that there was. You know, it was put upon clubs. You know, and people were left outside the room, and therefore that's why you've got this fractured nature from the likes of the DDSL. There's an element of mistrust between League of Ireland clubs and schoolboy clubs, when really, you know, ultimately, you know, we want the same thing. We want Irish football to improve. We want to progress our players. We want to bring them through, and it comes down to money. Yeah. You know, training compensation, you know, transfer fees for players, all that type of stuff. Everybody wants to sell players on, move players on, and reinvest it then possibly into your clubs. But if that's the model, it can't be reinvested into my first team or Vinny's first team. It has to be put back into your youth system to try and, you know, raise the standards.
But again, that goes back to having people at the club who were aware of that, Keith, and the skilled professionals to realise that.
And that's why I can't speak for Pats. I grew up a Pats fan, so I grew up in that. I played for Cherry Orchard. I know a lot of people at Cherry Orchard who go down every week and watch Pats stand on the Cammack. You can't tell me there isn't people there with the same drive to make Pats better. That doesn't mean if they sell a player and they get 20,000, that should go straight into someone's kiddie. That's not what anyone would be suggesting. I don't think any club would suggest that. There would have been that fear at the beginning, but sitting down and working together and saying, if a player is signed and this happens, why haven't we linked up with clubs better? And actually, I still think there's an opportunity to do it. And actually, it would fix so much. Yes, the facilities have to be better, but if Bowes and Kevin's are going to a local government to get a training centre, the voice of that is so much louder than Kevin's going on their own, or Bowes going on their own, and that's where we need people making clear decisions. I see where I'm from in Tala, we've got Sacred Heart up on the hill with amazing 3 floodlight pitches, AstroTurf. You get Fettercairn down the road who are playing out of a park. You get Killinard and Celtic playing out of another park, and you've got 7 clubs instead of one facility that the council pay for and fund, and all our kids are going to one facility. And we're just too fractured. And until we start joining up together, Irish football is going to struggle until we start joining up together. And we've an opportunity with our underage setup to do it, particularly in Dublin. It's very fixable in Dublin.
That's the word, I suppose, opportunity. So, Keith, there's so much opportunity. If I sit down here in a year with you, do you think things will have progressed a lot further than what they have progressed in recent times?
I hope so. We all live in hope. We all want what's best for Irish football. Like I said, I think there is a clearer understanding and vision for Irish football now. Obviously, it's very important that we make, you know, the right decisions and get the right people in to do the job. And there is a culture change, you know, around Irish football. And I think Stephen has brought that. You know, you can see.
But that's massive. You can't underestimate the link Stephen has towards the league and what he feels and the grow he has for it as a League of Ireland person, now manager of the international team. I'm sure it gives yourselves massive hope as well, and to think you could strive for something like that as well down the line. But the connection that Stephen has for the league here and Irish football has to be a good thing.
Alan, he's brought a freshness.
Already.
He's brought a freshness. He's a different narrative to previous managers. Previous managers did not concern themselves with the underage international teams. Stephen is embedding himself central to that. So he's got a methodology that he wants from the senior team down to the 21s, into the 19s, and across all the age groups.
Well, he mentioned it in the press conference. The one line that stuck out for me, which was brilliant, and it goes back to, I suppose, a lot of discussions we're having about everybody coming together, a cohesive unit from under 15 up to the senior team now. And there's communication with Jason Donoghue, Paul Azam, Colin O'Brien, Andy Reid, Jim Crawford, all the way up to Stephen.
Yeah, and he has that openness and transparency that it's, you know, that everything is shared. And I suppose that's the reason why he is on the executive board, or as the international director as such. You know, I know yesterday he played it down a little bit, but I suppose he has to give a voice to those underage international teams. He has to make sure that those international teams improve. He talked about identifying players earlier and retaining players, and to ensure that we have the best pool of talent available to us. But he's got to make sure that, I suppose, the resources are put towards those teams from an executive level in order for the standards to be raised. That we're not, you know, I think Mexico have played a number of underage games here over recent years. They travel Europe, you know, for a month, and they play different countries around the continent of Europe, and to give themselves different exposures, give their players different exposures. They're together as a group. You know, wouldn't that be wonderful that if we could put our, you know, some of our international teams together and let them travel to different continents, to different countries, to go and experience different you know, a standard of opposition, different playing philosophy, style of plays, all that type of stuff. I think essentially, you know, part of Stephen's role on that board will be to try and implement that and possibly open up those opportunities for some of the underage teams.
Therein lies potentially the problem. To be fair to people in the FEI, the 13s, the 15s, 16s, 17s, Mick McCarthy was meeting them people as well. That's not a new thing, to be fair to people in the FEI. So, but there's definitely more openness with Stephen, and people can go and meet him much more. But the problem we have is Stephen has to, if we're going to go down the line of everything Stephen says at the top is the way forward, I mean, within reason, obviously we challenge him, but I mean, if that's the new pathway for Irish football, which I think it should be, then there's no point in him losing to Slovakia and having a poor result and then under massive pressure, and then everything is thrown out because we've got to get results. We have to take a long-term view of this, and you look at what Northern Ireland have done, and with lesser sort of amount of players, and they got to European Championships, but there was pain in the middle of that as well, and they've put in their new underage academies, and Michael O'Neill has led that. To be honest with you, people, well, that's Vinny looking after Stephen, but Stephen Kenny should be on a long-term contract. If this is the path we're going, he's got to be on a 4 to a 6, at least 2 World Cup cycles, and say, go and fix Irish football for us. If we do believe in him, tell him to go and fix Irish football for us. At the top of the tree, speak to the board. The one thing he will demand is that our 15s, 17s and 19s, he'll back the manager trying to get the highest standard, the highest preparation, the best hotels, not arriving the day before, not being told, oh, your tracksuit's on the way. Stephen won't accept that. So we've got someone at the top of the tree now that we've got to back and support. And I think it will filter down. I believe he is the right man for that. That's up for other people to decide, but we've got to back him now. We can't have him under pressure come January because he's only won a game or 2. And that's going to be the concern for me, that we've got to support somebody now if we're going to put them into position and actually change the game from the top and let it filter down. And I think we've got to back him. And as I said, I know people will say, you're looking after your own mate there with a new deal. But we've got to put him in a position now. If we hold him that highly today, we can't say in January, February, oh no, all his ideas are wrong. They have to be given time to be implemented.
Okay, lads, you've been absolutely brilliant with your time. Keith, the resumption of the league is 3 weeks away, is it? So I wish you all the best, not only with the league, but the European scene as well. That's upcoming, but I really appreciate your time. Lots of food for thought as well for people. That's all we have today on Cawley's Call, but do join us next week for another chat. The podcast is available on all podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and also on my YouTube channel. Chat soon. Thank you for listening to Cawley's Call, powered by Benetti Menswear. For more interviews like this, please subscribe to my podcast or follow on all my social media channels.